Hey, what's up? Thanks for joining us right here, right now, online at Discovery. I know we've got a lot of people that are joining us from all over Pittsburgh, but we also have people from El Salvador, South Africa, maybe even Canada, not to mention many more places in these semi-United States. But for those of you who are a little bit closer to our home base, we wanted to remind you that we have this permanent home in the works, and every single day we get closer and closer to this place being open, to being a reality, for us to be inside. It's happening so fast. We're not really even months away anymore, but like weeks away at this point. Drywall's up and the play place inside is about to move into its permanent spot like tomorrow. Furniture's ordered. Guys, ladies, it's happening. And a date's gonna come at you very soon for our grand opening. If you're in our area, we'd love to invite you to make your way out here to be a part of this when you feel comfortable. And we promise this place will be as safe as possible when you come. But of course, one of our permanent homes is already open. It's right here online. As always, if you want to partner with us as we continue to pursue God's mission that He's given us, there are a ton of ways you can do that, but one of them is financially. At Discovery, we want to inspire a culture of generosity. People that are giving back to God because everything we have is a gift from Him, and then trusting Him to use it to multiply it for His purposes. And here at Discovery, you guys have been so generous, so thank you so much for that. If you'd like to be generous today too, you can hit the give link that you see right there on the screen. Right now, our neighborhood groups, they're starting back up and regathering in different ways. Many of them this week, others very soon, and we even have some groups that are online only just for someone like you. So you can hit that link to join in. During this series, they're gonna kick off using our Exodus reading plan. It's meant to take our series a little bit deeper, make the story of Exodus more connected to your individual life. You can use that book too on your own. To find out more about all of our relentless resources, just text Discovery PGH to 77411 or hit the link that you see on the screen. Today we're continuing our journey through the book of Exodus, where we'll pick up the story with a disillusioned Moses who's kind of settled into a comfortable lifestyle and rhythm. But everything's about to change as he finds himself confronted by a voice coming from a bush that's on fire. At least 2020 wasn't that weird. The bush tells him these famous words, "Take off your shoes, this is holy ground." As we move into worship, let's be like Moses. We want to invite you to do the same thing. You might already have your shoes off. Many of you are at home or on your couch. But if you can take off your shoes, take off your slippers, take off your socks, and let your feet feel the ground. If you've been around Discovery for a while, don't worry, we're not going to make you donate them this time. But God is here, and He is there. He is wherever you are. The patron saint of Pittsburgh is Mr. Fred Rogers, and he believed that every time that he recorded a program, there was holy ground between him and the people watching, the kids watching. We believe that's true too. This is holy ground. And we hope that you experience that just a little bit by remembering that you are in the presence of God by taking off your shoes.
Discovery. Last week I talked about how one of our core values here is we want to bring heaven to earth. We want as it is in heaven to be tangible where we live. In Revelation, we get a glimpse of heaven from the last living apostle of Jesus, and he tells us that heaven is a place where followers of Jesus will be from every nation, every tribe, every race, and every language, that we will all be together on equal footing. No more privilege of any kind, no more levels, no more hierarchy, just God and His people. Racial privilege is not a new thing. Even last week, as we started our study in Exodus, we read about the privilege that Moses received. He wasn't Egyptian, he was a Hebrew. And the Hebrews were the people who had been forced into slavery that made Egypt the powerhouse that it became. And when Moses grew up, God woke him up to what was going on, and he finally realized, those Hebrews, those are my people. God opened Moses' eyes to the Hebrew struggle, and he knew he had to take action. And God eventually used him to free the Hebrews and lead them to the promised land. But his first step was to open his eyes, to become aware. Moses was a prophet of things to come then, and I really believe Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was a modern day prophet. And his words back in the 1960s are still echoing, still relevant today. On January 6th in Washington, D.C., every one of us should have had our eyes fully opened to the continuation of white privilege. Even though there was ample evidence through various social media outlets of the storm that was coming, the white mob that stormed the Capitol building was met very differently than if our black brothers and sisters would have done the same thing. As a matter of fact, in June 2020, just a few months before, when the Black Lives Matter organization held a peaceful protest in Washington, D.C., shortly after the murder of George Floyd, the National Guard was out in full force and stood on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, ready for anything. President Trump, who said of our black brothers and sisters during the protests last year, "When the looting starts, the shooting starts." When he responded to the white domestic terrorists who filled the halls of the Capitol where one police officer had been viciously murdered, his words were, "I love you, go home." The lack of resistance that met that mob and the response of our president is the epitome of white privilege. And enough is enough. This has to be our Moses moment. If we deny what is plain to see, we are complicit. And the first step of bringing heaven to earth is to start seeing black people as our people, to stand with them, to help them, and to call out the sin of racism in our world, in our own hearts. God, we remember this weekend that we're not there yet, that heaven is not fully known here on this earth, that this is a place of sin, and we recognize racism is one of those sins, and it is rampant in our nation. Father, open our eyes to how we can become aware of the hierarchy, of the privilege in our nation. That we, as Caucasian people, some of us, that we know that we have. And God, may we look to lift up the oppressed, to lift up the marginalized, to start seeing our black brothers and sisters as our people. God, may we bring heaven to this earth as our church, Father, looking more and more like you in every single way. So, Father, open our eyes to the sins in this world, but especially the sin in our hearts. It's in Jesus' name that we pray. Amen.
In November of 2019, Discovery began a courageous journey of pursuing God like never before in our faith and through our generosity. And through much prayer and seeking God's direction, the Lee team and the staff of the church put before us a bold vision for Discovery's future that we called Relentless. You know, as our church home gets nearer and nearer to completion, and we prepare to throw open wide the doors to our community, and we feel a close connection to Moses as he faithfully followed God and he led the people out of slavery and into the promised land. Well, God is now calling us to faithfully, to relentlessly follow him as we lead hundreds, maybe thousands of people who right now are enslaved by sin, and to lead them to Jesus, the one who can truly set them free. Therefore, we won't stop. We won't stop asking God what he has next for us. Over the next 5 weeks, we're going to dig deep into the book of Exodus.
My name is Heather Gerlach. My husband is Blair, and we have a daughter, Eden, who's 15, and Owen, who is 12. So over quarantine, I was just getting kind of lonely and looking for more interaction in person with other women. And I just happened to see that Discovery was having a ladies' night outside, and I decided to reach out to Beth Huffman, who has been a member here at Discovery Church, and asked her if we could meet up. And when I finally got here, I realized that I knew a couple other people as well. Well, while I was there, I learned that there was going to be a Halloween event happening the following weekend where I could bring my family and we could hang out and play some mini golf and just kind of get a feel for what the community is like here at Discovery. So that was a great opportunity for us to find something fun to do, something safe to do since we would be outside, and also just kind of get connected in that way. When I'm invited to something, it actually means a lot. Being a mom with a child with special needs, being included in things despite the fact that we might not be able to come, that we really want to, just the invitation itself just makes us feel as though we are worthy of being at that thing with those people, whether or not it fits into our lifestyle at that point in time. I think it's really important that a church does that they invite people. Relentless to me means not giving up when things don't look the way that you thought that they should, or when it feels like you don't maybe have everything lined up, that God can use whatever it is that He's given you. So that is one of the things I've really loved seeing about Discovery, is how, you're in the middle of a pandemic. Let's sit outside and let's have, fellowship around the fire. Let's go do some putt-putt. Let's hang out in this building where there's no walls and sit in your camping chairs. I just love when people use whatever God has given to them at that point in time to invite more people in and to learn more about Him. I think with this new building, it could be huge for this community. It's a great location right here in Mars, but just the fact that it has, first of all, the mini golf, that's just a great attraction for families with younger kids or maybe even big kids. It's great just to be able to do something fun. Sometimes new people come to a church and they just don't know even how to hold themselves or who to talk to, what to do. I think that's a great way for it to kind of break up the discomfort and maybe even start some conversation with other people around. I would say to people here at Discovery, to keep people engaged and wanting to check out this church, to keep inviting, to keep it fun, and to let people know that they don't need to be perfect, that they are seen and that they are loved.
Well, we are in week 2 of our 5-week journey through the book of Exodus. And when we last left Moses, he had fled Egypt after killing a man. And he's been in the desert for a long period of time. He's been tending sheep. He was born a Hebrew, but adopted into the palace of the Egyptian Pharaoh. But as he becomes a young man, God starts to stir his heart, and he realizes that the nation of Israel, the Hebrews, who have been slaves for 400 years in Egypt, that they are his people. And God is waking Moses up to who he wants him to be. Today we find Moses sitting on a rock in the middle of the desert, watching his sheep. We don't know how long it's been since he went on the run. All we know is it was a long period of time, maybe a year, maybe 10, maybe longer. But Moses is in God's waiting room. Have you been there? It's a tough room to be in for sure, but God was stirring his heart. Moses was beginning to learn who he wants to be. He wanted to help his people, but now he's stuck in a desert caring for sheep. He can't go back to Egypt. He's a fugitive. He's got to be frustrated. But God has him right where he wants him. In Exodus 3, Moses is spending another day in the waiting room, and he discovers a bush that's burning, but it's not being consumed by the fire. So he goes over to check out this strange phenomenon, and here's what happens in verse 4. When the Lord saw that he had gone over to look, God called to him from within the bush, "Moses, Moses." And Moses said, "Here I am." "Don't come any closer," God said. "Take off your sandals, for the place where you're standing is holy ground. God says, I want to invite you into my presence, but it's going to be on my terms. I don't want anything to come in between us, Moses, even that little strap of leather on your feet. That's how God works. You can't come into the presence of God and dictate the terms. He's God, you're not. He is holy and perfect. You and I, we're not. So starting in verse 7, it says, the Lord said, I have indeed seen the misery of my people in Egypt. I have heard them crying out because of their slave drivers, and I am concerned about their suffering. So I have come down to rescue them from the hand of the Egyptians and to bring them up out of that land into a good and spacious land, a land flowing with milk and honey. And then verse 9 says, and now the cry of the Israelites has reached me, and I have seen the way the Egyptians are oppressing them, so now go. I'm sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt. And with these words, God now fully reveals to Moses who he wants him to become. He says, I have called you to be the deliverer of my people. Now, God never says, I need you, Moses. He doesn't. Truth is, God doesn't need any of us. He's God, and if he wants to accomplish something, he can do it with you or without you. But what's amazing about God is that even though he doesn't need Moses and us, he invites us to partner with what he's already doing in the world. God is going to rescue his people, but he invites Moses to be the tangible presence, the chosen vessel that God will work through. And there's a great parallel of Moses being the deliverer of the people of Israel in the Old Testament, and Jesus being the ultimate deliverer of all people in the New Testament. And I encourage all of you to dive deep into our Exodus study in your Exodus booklet. It's incredible. But now Moses sees it. This is who God wants him to be. He heard it from the mouth of God himself. God says, I am sending you. Now there's a hidden truth in this passage that I want to pull out and show you, and here it is. God doesn't just take us to a different place, but to a better place. The Israelites had been slaves for 400 years. Just getting out of Egypt, out of slavery, would have been a huge upgrade. But God says, I'm going to lead you to a great and spacious land, a land flowing with milk and honey. I'm not just taking you to a different place, but to a far better place. You know, before my family and I moved to Pittsburgh so I could become the lead pastor at Discovery, I was at a church in Ohio. I had a great staff. The church was growing, it was thriving. We went from 500 people to over 1,000 people during my time there. We had a nice house. It was a quick drive to my family's house in the state of Indiana. My wife's mom was in the town that we were living in. We could have settled in and made a pretty comfortable life for the next 25 years. But Janie and I were on our prayer walks for most of our evenings, and we were both feeling God was calling us to something else. We just didn't know what. So we just prayed that we would be open. And not too long after that, God connected us with Discovery. I'll be honest, at first, I wasn't that interested. We were being pursued by a large church in the Tacoma, Seattle area. It was a growing church, 2 sites, different things going on. And Discovery was a much smaller church than I was at in Ohio. And most pastors in my position usually look for larger churches. But after meeting with the lead team of Discovery and seeing the potential of this church and the people here, I just felt God saying, Matt, this is what I'm preparing you for. It's going to be my power at work, but I'm sending you. It's been such a great decision for my family. We absolutely love it here. God doesn't just want to take us to a different place, but to a far better place. Back to Moses. We got a guy in the desert talking to a bush. Now, I bet many of us would love it if we could go out of our houses every day and there would be a burning rhododendron and that would tell us what to do. But even if there was, most of us wouldn't listen. We wouldn't. We would argue with it. And if you are arguing with a burning rhododendron in your front yard, please don't come and see me. Pastors cannot prescribe the medication that you need. But Moses begins to argue with God. He first says, "Who am I that you would send me?" I mean, God, I've been gone a long time. Remember? A long period of time. I've been in the desert watching sheep. All my connections in Egypt, they're gone. I don't have all the ends like I used to. I mean, who am I, God? And then he says, God, what if they ask me who you are? What do I say then? What am I supposed to tell them? I'm going to need your bona fides. And God says, Moses, I'll take care of that. I just need you to go. And Moses argues again. What if they don't believe me? I mean, I wouldn't believe it myself. I mean, hey, Pharaoh, you don't remember me, but I was the adopted grandson of the last Pharaoh. And I've been in the desert for the last decade. I was talking to a bush, and it told me that I needed to come back and meet with you, and that you need to give me like all your workforce. I mean, God, why wouldn't anyone believe me? And by this point, God's probably rolling his eyes. He says, Moses, would you take the staff in your hand and throw it on the ground? And Moses does, and it turns into a snake. Now, this is the point where if this is me, I'm out. From my perspective, there is no such thing as a venomous and non-venomous snake. They're all lethal because I will have a heart attack and die. Not a fan. But Moses does it. It turns into a snake, and then God says, good, now pick it up by the tail. No way. But Moses picks it up, and it turns right back into a staff. So God says, Moses, look, I've got this. I will reveal my wonders to Pharaoh. And Moses, he's still not convinced. He says, God, they've got magicians back in Egypt. I'm pretty sure I've seen some tricks just like that one. And God says, take your arm, Moses, and stick it into your cloak. And Moses does. And when he pulls it out, it is covered with disease, boils, and leprosy. And Moses is probably freaking out. And God says, Moses, take your arm and put it back in your cloak. Moses does. And this time he pulls it back out and completely back to normal. God says, Moses, I got this. Now Moses says, but God, listen, I'm not a good speaker. When I try to speak in public, I get all nervous, I stammer, I don't know what to say. God says, I will put the words in your mouth, Moses. I got this. Now Moses finally hits the pinnacle of crybabiness and just says, please, God, send someone else. I don't want to go. And in chapter 4, starting in verse 14, it says, then the Lord's anger burned against Moses. And he said, what about your brother, Aaron the Levite? I know he can speak well. He's already on his way to meet you, and his heart will be glad when he sees you. You shall speak to him and put words in his mouth. I will help both of you speak, will teach you what to do. He will speak to the people for you, and it will be as if he were your mouth and as if you were God to him. But take this staff in your hand so you can perform the miraculous signs with it. Here's what we learn here. All of us together plus God equals all that we need. God says, no more excuses. I will take care of everything. Stop your whining. Become who I want you to be. Let's do this together. Us plus God equals all that we need. I've been saying the last few weeks that the reason why we chose the book of Exodus for this study is because it's like a mirror to where we are as a church and individuals right now. As we read it, it will read us. We will see our reflection in the journey of the people of God as He leads them to their new home. And here is where we find ourselves in the story of Moses and Exodus today. We as individuals and as a church, we struggle when it comes to moving forward. Let me give you a few examples. I think sometimes we have a tendency to look inward instead of outward. This is what Moses is guilty of here. He is so focused on his inability that he is blind to God's ability. Moses is like, I can't do this, I can't do this, I can't do this. God's like, I know, but I can. And we see the same thing with people stuck in modern Christianity, where people are lukewarm, self-absorbed, and focused on Christian consumerism. Their mantra is, it's all about me, my preferences, my needs, my feelings. After a worship service is over, instead of talking about what God was saying to them, their focus is on, I wish they would have done different songs. Message too long. I didn't like how the pastor said that one thing because he was being political or not political enough. I can't believe this church asks people to wear a mask. Can you believe such a thing? Some of you may remember, who are my age, The Muppet Show. Classic show. Every week you would have the whole Muppet gang from Kermit putting on a stage show for the audience. Everyone on stage doing their part. But there were these two old guys sitting in the balcony. You remember them? Do you know their names? Their names were Statler and Waldorf. And they would sit in the balcony, high above the stage, looking down at all the performers, and they would just rip them. They would criticize everything. And I always thought that they were hilarious until I realized how many of those people actually exist in the real world. And sometimes you find them in churches. Because here's the deal. The audience in a church service, in a worship service, isn't the people in the seats or the other side of the screen on an online worship service. The audience is an audience of one. It's God. All of us are on stage for Him. We're worshiping Him through our serving, through the lifting of our hands high and praising Him through song and the Lord's Supper, through our generosity and engaging with Him through the teaching of His Word. It's all for Him. None of it is about us. In order to move forward together, we need to fight against looking inward and focus on the outward. Another thing that keeps us from moving forward together is we become exclusive instead of inclusive. We start to treat a church like a country club. Like, I like it just the way that it is. I've got my seat. I've had my seat for so long that the cushion is perfectly shaped to my rear end. And we have a great opportunity as we get ready to open up our new home to not let that become a habit. I would encourage you every week when you come here to sit in a different place each week so you can meet different people and always remember it's not about you. I would also challenge you to sit up front by the stage, to leave the back sections for guests who arrive late or because they're checking in their kids and Discovery Kids. One of the worst feelings is being a guest and walking in late and being forced to walk to the front where the empty seats are. Sit up front. It's so easy to slide into becoming exclusive rather than inclusive. In Moses' case, I think it's funny that he never even considered his brother Aaron. Like, God, my brother is actually a really great speaker. Could I ask him for help? Sure, Moses. No. It was God who already thought about including Aaron in the process. Inclusion was part of His provision. Including other people was part of God's provision for Moses. And Discovery, as new people come into this building, always remember that inclusion is part of God's provision. That we're getting better with every single person who becomes part of our family. How cool is that? Let me show you something else that's happened in churches over the last several decades. Over the past 40 years or so, there have been 3 huge paradigm shifts that have taken place in the majority of churches in the United States. Now, you'll find some churches who are outliers or who are stuck and who haven't made some of these transitions, but this is true of the majority. From the 1940s to about the 1980s, the majority of churches had this type of focus when it came to new people who came to their church. It was believe, become, and belong. Believe, become, belong. Let me explain. We would love for you to be part of our church if you first believe exactly what we believe. You got to believe what we believe. Then you must become or behave like us. And then and only then can you belong here. That completely resonates with me in the church that I grew up, other churches that I saw during that time. And there are some churches who are still stuck in that mentality, that you need to believe like we do, then you need to behave just like we behave. Don't see these movies, don't drink these drinks, don't do this, don't do that. And then and only then can you belong. Then you're a part of us. Then we will open out our arms and welcome you in. But you have to jump through all of those hoops to get there. Then in the 1990s, a paradigm shift took place and looked a whole lot more like Jesus, to be honest. And Discovery was actually started in 2003, kind of under this mentality, and what we've always been, and it is this: belong, believe, become. Here at Discovery, no matter who you are, what your gender is, what your race, economic class, what your age, where you are in your journey with Jesus, you just belong. You belong here. We're going to point you then to Jesus through the Word of God, and I believe if you give God the opportunity to move into your life, He absolutely will. And over time, it's my hope that you will begin to surrender your life to Christ, and the Spirit of God moves into your life. Then as He's working on you, He starts to change you from the inside out. You become obedient to the commands of Christ, from being baptized, giving, serving. Those steps just become natural because He's helping you become like Jesus. That's when behaviors change. That's not my job to change your behavior. I don't want that job. I'm not going to police that. It's God's job. But culture is beginning to shift again, especially with like the Gen Z and younger portion of millennials. And now the progression for many people is it's become, belong, believe. Here's what I mean by this. For people outside of the church, again, especially of younger generations, they are intrigued by the causes of Christ. They are interested in social justice because Jesus was interested in social justice. They are intrigued by the care of the poor because Jesus cared for the poor. They want to devote themselves to racial reconciliation because Jesus was devoted to racial reconciliation. And if you ask them what they think of Jesus, they would be quick to say, love that guy. But if you ask them what they think of the church, they would say, not really a fan. I mean, you'll hear that very thing voiced in an upcoming video in a few weeks from a story of someone in our church named Brittany and her husband Greg. It's a powerful story. And a lot of churches today are running from social justice and race conversations because they think it's all about politics. And if that's what you think, man, that's on you. That's your own political blinders. Because Jesus didn't care a lick about elephants or donkeys. He just cared about people who were being oppressed and beaten down and marginalized by society. So when these people see churches engaged in the causes of Christ, they say, I kind of want to do that. Last year, we were just about to do a massive food packing event where we're going to have all these people packing meals, and we were going to send thousands and thousands of meals to our partners in El Salvador. And then the pandemic happened, and that didn't happen. But we are starting to look ahead to the fall of this year and see the possibility of that happening again. And some of the people in your life who are your people, who might not be willing to come to a church service yet, that would be a perfect invite for them. They want to be a part of a group who is doing something bigger than themselves, and many of them will start behaving or becoming like Jesus before they really even know who He is. And then they serve alongside of other Discovery people and realize we're not so weird. We're not weird people. We only drink the blood of goats on leap year. And they start to feel like they belong. And then down the road, they're ready to give their lives to Jesus and believe in Him. You see how that process works. We got to fight the pull to exclusivity and always fight to be inclusive. Here's the last thing that stops us from moving forward together, is when we become resistant to change. You know, Moses was afraid and resistant to change for a long period of time. He grew super comfortable out there in the desert with his sheep. He didn't want to get mixed up in some big political mess back in Egypt. He didn't want to lead a bunch of complaining people who are going to whine every step of the journey. He didn't want to deal with the pain of change. And it kept him from moving forward until God intervened. I said, I'm so glad that I am part of a church that isn't scared of change. I'm so glad that I am part of a church that is willing to risk big for the sake of people who are far from God. I'm so glad that I'm part of a church that doesn't set up all kinds of stupid religious hoops that people have to jump through before they can belong here. Man, I wish all of you could get glimpses into our lead team meetings. Some churches call them elders. We call them the lead team. We just don't get bogged down in discussions about where are we going to buy the toilet paper from, or what color should that wall over there be? It's all about how can we make sure that we're reaching the most people who are far from God. I'm so glad that I am part of a church that invests in the next generation. It's not just about dedicated space in a building. It's about the people. You want to know a secret? If you want to make an eternal difference in your life, do you know the best place where you need to be serving? It's in our next gen ministries. Discovery Kids, Discovery Students. We are about to see a massive increase of children and students at Discovery as we open our new building. And we need more people just like you serving in these two hugely influential areas. You can talk to Travis Rogan, our kids pastor, Alex Scott, who works with our middle school and high school students. They would love to know your willingness to help. And I'm so glad that I'm part of a church that isn't afraid of change. Listen, if there's something that you do not like about Discovery, just drives you nuts, you can't stand it, take a breath, because it'll probably change. It's going to eventually change. But on the other side, if there's something about Discovery that you absolutely love, take a breath. It's probably going to change too. It works both ways. Know this. We don't change things for the sake of change. That wouldn't make any sense at all. Any and all changes we make at Discovery is to better position us to bring people to heaven, to bring earth to heaven. Will this help us reach more people with the good news of Jesus? Yeah? Then let's do it. Will this change make us more about us and steer us to a more exclusive mindset? Then no, we run from that. Over the last 2.5 years, since I've been here, I've met people who've come here, and then they've kind of brought their own agenda of what a church should look like, and it's pretty easy to spot them early on. And they get very uncomfortable very quick here, and they realize their agenda is not going to fly, and they move on. Listen, that's fine. That's absolutely fine. We hope you find the church you're looking for. But Discovery, we can accomplish so much more together. We need to wrap our minds around that math equation of us plus God equals all that we need. Moses, at the end of Exodus 4, he finally gets on God's program and sets off to go back to Egypt. But there's one little detail that the Bible doesn't tell us, but we assume that Moses does. And that is that he puts his shoes back on and he accepts the challenge that God puts him on. So here's your challenge. Before you put your shoes back on, I'm sending you. And here's what I'm asking you to do. 4 things. Number 1, I'm asking you to invite. We believe, here's the date, we think March 21st is going to be our grand opening of our new home. invite people to come and see. Number 2, I'm asking you to serve. With more people coming, we need to be guest ready, and that means we need everyone pulling their weight. When we have people come over to our house for dinner, everyone in my family has a part to play. And we will need every one of us serving in every area. Number 3, I'm challenging all of us to give generously. This is the most generous church I've ever had the privilege of being a part of ever. And last week you heard about this card, online people. I want you to have one of those commitment cards in your hand. You can just text Discovery PGH to 77411 and be praying about what God is calling you to commit for the next 12 months of our relentless journey together. Because we know we're going to have more people as we open, but we also know new people, giving is the last area that they surrender over to God. So they're going to come and check things out, and they won't start giving right away. So we all need to buy them some time, everybody giving generously. And lastly, I'm asking you to pray. Pray for the people who drive down 228. Pray for the people who hear about Discovery in the next couple months. Pray that God will stir the hearts of people in our community who right now feel the holy discontent in their lives. That there's something more. 2020 kicked a lot of people in the teeth. It's also made a lot of people second guess their current life trajectory. It could be that God's timing for this place is perfect to present the good news of Jesus to the most people possible. That's what I'm sending you to do. Are you ready? Are you ready to be sent, to go on mission together? Then let's put our shoes on and together move forward with God.
Well, Moses was surprised to find himself in the presence of God. But while he stumbled across him, like maybe you stumbled across this stream, we have the opportunity to be in God's presence anytime we want. Not only just around us, but actually inside of us. Every week we make a habit of doing this simple practice. We eat a little bit of bread and we drink a little bit of juice. These were symbols that Jesus gave us that actually comes from this Exodus story to remind us of his story. He died for us, but also he came back to life for us. And as we eat, we imagine we're at this celebration dinner with millions of people across the planet in history, and we remember that Jesus is alive and that he's in charge and that he lives inside of us. Like Moses, let's take some time to be in God's presence and listen for his calling. Where is his voice coming from? What's it saying? What's it telling you to do? Where is it telling you to go? How are you supposed to get uncomfortable just like he was as God sends you into the world too?
There's no need in You got it, you got it, you got it.